Alright, so today I'm going to show you how to debug webhooks with Node, Express and Visual Studio Code. So here I have a very simple Express app. It just has one endpoint, webhook receive, which is my webhook endpoint that I'll be testing and debugging today. All it does is it takes the request and sends it back with the response. So to set up debugging for this, you need a launch.json file in your .vs code folder. The main part of this is the program attribute. It needs to point to the file where you have your app.listen statement. In this case it's app.js, and so that's what's in here. So now I'm going to set a breakpoint just here in the method, and I can go down to debug and start debugging. So that's launched my Express server. It's listening on port 3000. So I'm just going to do a simple request using Postman, and that should hit the breakpoint. Change this to post. No, it is post. So you can see here the breakpoint has been hit. So I have over here the inspector. I can look at the request, response, all the attributes within those objects. If I let it continue, then I can see it's come back here with the payload that I've sent it, which is what it's supposed to do. So this is great for testing locally. But the idea of webhooks is you have some external provider, say Stripe or Twilio, who's going to send you a notification over the internet. And for that, you need a public URL. So you can't use localhost because localhost is only visible from your computer. It's not visible from Stripe servers. So you need a public URL. There's a few different ways to get one. You could deploy your code to a remote server and run it there, but that would make debugging quite difficult, if not impossible. You might have to resort to console.logs and things, and that's just going to make things harder. And so instead of doing that, I'm going to use a tool called expose.sh, which will straight away give me a public URL for my localhost server. So all I do is I'm going to make sure this is running. It is, and expose 3000, which is the port here. Okay, now it's generated a random URL, so I'll copy that. I'm going to use the HTTPS URL because a lot of webhook providers, they're only going to send you a request if your server is running over HTTPS for security reasons, to avoid, man-in-the-middle attacks and things like that. So if I go over here, I'll just replace this URL. And I still have my breakpoint set, so when I send this request, that breakpoint should be hit. So there we go. So I have just sent a request to a public URL, and it's made it all the way to localhost, and it's hit my breakpoint. So I still have the inspector over here. I can see the request. So let's say your webhook provider's documentation is crap, they don't explain the request properly, you can actually get them to send you a request, and in your debugger you can see the request. You can see the body, look at the request body, see the structure, and then you write your code accordingly instead of guessing. So let that continue, and it's successfully completed. There is another way to do this. Expose does allow you to have custom domains if you pay them $5 a month. So if I do that, I can just use this URL. This just saves you from having to reconfigure a random URL every time you want to use it. And there you go, so it's hit my breakpoint. You can see the body, everything that I need to see. Continue. And now it has come back successfully. So for this Express app that I have, the code is on GitHub. If you want to copy my launch.json file, I've committed it as launch.json example, so it's not to conflict with your actual one if you want to put other stuff in there. You just copy that to launch.json basically. I put a link in the description below for the GitHub repository. It's MIT licensed, so you can pretty much do whatever you want with it. And that's it. So now you know how to debug webhooks.